So we've talked about compulsory license provision. We just went over the negotiated license, and now we're talking about the controlled composition clause. Now remember a couple things. We want to talk about how the transaction of a mechanical license typically takes place. There are other ways that this happens, but typically the record company, who is the creator and producer of a master, which records the song, is requesting a mechanical license from the owner of that song or the person allowed to administer those rights, which is typically the publisher. There are, of course, differences and variants on this theme, but the most common per capita transaction is a record company seeking a mechanical license from the publisher because the record company is using that song in order to make their recordings, and they need to license the right of distribution and reproduction from the publisher. Okay? So, from that side, a record company is a for-profit business, and for-profit businesses are constantly looking for ways to reduce their expenses and or increase their revenue. There are only two ways that you can make more money in this world, and that is increasing your revenue and decreasing your expenses. It's true for people. It's also true for business. Now, I'm taking the moral judgment out of this example that I'm about to explain and just telling you what happened. A bunch of record companies got together and said, how can we reduce this federal obligation of mechanical royalties? Is there a way that we don't have to pay the full statutory rate for these mechanical licenses that we are obligated to obtain? What they did is they said, what if, because we have the ability to negotiate a better circumstance, like we do in our negotiated license, can we effectively say, hey, if you're signed to our record label and we are putting out your product and you wrote the songs, can we reduce the royalty rate and therefore our expense obligation for this particular album? So a bunch of people at record companies got together and said, we're going to say, if you've written your own work and you are signed to our record company, we are only going to pay you a reduced royalty rate for mechanical licenses. This is legal. It's okay. They did it. And if you are signing this record contract, you are agreeing to the rates that are baked inside of that agreement. So a controlled composition clause is quite literally a mechanical license that has been baked inside of the artist's contract with the record label. It's a mechanical license that has been baked into the artist's contract with the record label. If you don't like it, don't sign the artist contract. And today, more than ever, you have the ability of making the choice of not having a record label surrounding you. Now, a controlled composition clause is a provision in the artist contract with the record company that limits royalties paid for any composition written, published, or owned by the artist. So the written part is pretty simple to understand. If you write the songs that are being recorded and released on your album, then we can control the rate of payment for mechanical licenses. If you've published those songs, meaning I'm an artist that also owns a publishing company. This is fairly common as you get more successful as an artist. You start to branch out and own more things. Publishing company, maybe a record label subsidiary. We've seen these things all the time. If you publish a song, right, then we can control that song. You didn't write it, but your publishing company publishes it. Or if it's owned by the artist, like, I don't know, Michael Jackson owning Beatles songs, if he recorded one of the songs that he purchased in the ATV deal, then that song could also be controlled. He didn't write it, but he purchased the song and has subsequently recorded it. So written, published, or owned by, if any of those three apply, then the record company can control the rate for mechanicals that they would be obligated to pay you. So the items that are typically found in the controlled composition clause are, for new artists, the rate is reduced again to 75% of the minimum statutory rate. Now, the minimum part of this is songs under 5 minutes. You don't get to calculate that 6 times 1.75 cents, 7 times 1.75 cents. It's just stays at that 9.1 cents for the current rate right now. And so what you get is 75% of the minimum. When they say minimum, that's what they mean, minimum statutory rate. The next one is a ceiling or cap on the amount of mechanical royalties paid by the record company. And it's usually 10 times 75% statutory rate. So they'll only pay you, and in other words, they're only going to pay you for 10 songs on that record. You could record 20 if you want to, but your cap states that we are only going to pay you for 10 songs for this particular record. We're going to reduce the per song rate to 75% of the minimum statutory rate, and we're only going to pay you for 10 songs on that album, regardless of how many songs you put on there. Next one is mechanical royalties are paid from the first unit sold, and then any overages are going to be removed from your artist royalties account. So if you go over and you record 11 songs, 12 songs, 13 songs, or you're obligated to pay because you've done outside songs that are not controlled by your record contract, any of those overages are paid from your artist royalties, not your mechanical royalties. We'll talk about this a lot more in person when we go over some of these examples and calculations together, but I wanted just to give you kind of the lowdown on what things are typically found in a controlled composition clause. There's also some subsections inside of the controlled composition clause that came from the 1995 Copyright Act, which states that after June 22nd of 1995, we technically cannot reduce the royalty rate for songs that are purchased digitally. So if you're buying stuff off of iTunes, Amazon, etc., where you're owning the track, technically that is against subsection 115 of the Copyright Act that was given an amendment in 1995. I want to talk about Harry Fox agency as well. Harry Fox is not a person. It's not any of that, but it still exists to this day. It is a third-party organization that administers the issuance of mechanical licenses and the collection of royalties for a very significant number of publishers in the US. Now, Harry Fox used to handle the vast majority of mechanical licenses that existed across time. This is really because it was a pretty standardized transaction, and most of it was surrounding, again, remember, physical products. So when vinyl, CDs, cassettes were in their heyday, that transaction tends to be pretty simple to do. Once we get the royalty rate set from our controlled composition clause, which again, we're going to go over examples in class, in person. Once that gets set, what we do at that point is Harry Fox takes care of the actual issuance of license and collection of royalties and then pays the publisher. So the record company pays Harry Fox turns around and then pays the publisher. It started in 1927. It's now owned by CSAC. This was in an effort to become the mechanical licensing collective that we're talking about. Licenses may be applied for online, either in physical or digital copies, and very small quantities can be obtained using their profile song file, which is a way that you and I can just log in and request a license for the things that we're going to release on our CD Baby album that we're talking about earlier. As time has gone on, Harry Fox, in terms of issuing mechanical licenses for physical products, doesn't really have that same business model anymore. It's definitely something that's waning for them. However, in streaming, the record companies are not obligated to pay mechanical licenses as they are in physical formats or in ownership models. And the agency or the business model that takes care of the vast majority of the calculation and subsequent payment of streaming mechanicals is Harry Fox. Because of the long-standing database that they have of several decades, nearly 100 years of paying mechanical royalties in physical formats, they have a ton of information on who the publisher and the songwriter and where those payments should go. So Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, etc., are using Harry Fox as a third-party agent to calculate and distribute streaming royalties. So their business model has shifted. I think the last I checked, it was using a company called Rumblefish, but I could totally be wrong about that. But in the past, that's the kind of the silo that they used. So Harry Fox still relevant, kind of behind the scenes. They don't do much physical product anymore because that's just the way that our industry is working. But they do handle most of the streaming royalties that are paid. It's great to be affiliated with Harry Fox. They can do a bunch of different things on your behalf. Obviously, they license and collect royalties on your behalf. They conduct periodic audits for the record companies to make sure that those monies are being paid appropriately. If you are affiliated with Harry Fox, they can also do foreign collection for you in certain territories, not all of them, but some. They also have reciprocal agreements with ASCAP, so they can collect foreign performance income in rare instances as well. But it also comes with a disadvantage. Harry Fox charges an administration fee for doing this work, as they should. They're providing a service that they deserve to be paid for. But because of the nature of that transaction, the record company pays Harry Fox turns around and pays the publisher. There is this interim calculation in which Harry Fox has to do their job of calculating and aggregating royalties that are then paid to the publisher. And that process typically takes anywhere from 1 to 2 quarters. So the record company pays you in January, you don't see that money until June. So for cash flow purposes, sometimes it's more beneficial for me as a publisher to make sure I get that money as fast as possible. The other thing is that Harry Fox can't negotiate rates. They can merely administer the license. So if I'm a publisher, I still need to deal with the record company to negotiate any of those reduced mechanical rates and then authorize Harry Fox to just license and collect it on my behalf. So the dirty work gets done between the licensee and the publisher, the record company and the publisher, and then Harry Fox just merely papers that license and collects the royalties. Talk briefly about foreign royalties before we get into some calculation in person. The US is the only country that allows a reduction in mechanical rate. I said this previously, most other countries are operating on a percentage of PPD, or the published price to dealer. In other words, the wholesale price, right? Royalty structure in foreign territories is based on a percentage of what's known the published price to dealer, or PPD, and the royalties are divided equally among the songs on the album. So there is no controlled composition or reduction of rates. There's no cap in foreign territories. This is really just in the US. So if you recall from our Copyright Basics lecture, that 2013 CRB proposal had some of this language baked in. And this is, again, why my prediction of inevitably us leaving a penny rate behind and going full percentage of wholesale. This is why I think that. Foreign mechanical rights societies collect from labels and distribute to local publishers. U.S. publishers have to engage a foreign sub-publisher to collect royalties in that local territory. And like I mentioned before, Harry Fox has reciprocal agreements in some territories to collect foreign royalties for their U.S. publishers. So that's how those things kind of fall into place. Admittedly, I'm not an expert on foreign royalties, but I know enough to get me in trouble. And so I just wanted to convey a lot of that information to you guys as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to meet in person. We're going to do some calculations in person together and go over any questions that you guys have. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the Zoom session.